Thuman Radio Interview Archives, www.avbosthuman.com web link special.html. Beginning okay, I am looking at it this way. Things, meaning the times we live in, are damn strange, and getting stranger by the minute. Not only are the powers that be running around building end of the world seed vaults, they are also privately and in groups, buying up large amounts of farmlands in very high altitude places, and trying to shove swine flu vaccine up everyone's snout. Then there is the issue of the rapid and oscillating climate changes here on Earth, as well as the alterations of the climates on all the other planets in the solar system. And then there are the tremendous changes in the sun over this last decade, which continue. Then there are the various huge levels of changes to the Earth itself, such as the giant earthquakes, the resulting tsunamis, and other indications of major changes such as global glacial melt. To shorten the huge list of things wrong in these strange times, suffice it to say that everything from the health of the oceans and atmosphere, to the behavior of the self-appointed ruling elite is all screwed up, and that then brings us to 2012. Not simply the end of the Mayan long count calendar, but also a central focus of number codes and dozens of ancient myths that actually span the planet. The 2012 end date seemingly puts the capstone on our pyramid of changes noticeable in these remaining days prior to the winter solstice of December 21, 2012. Noting that the word solstice, meaning to stand still, actually describes a specific astronomic event, which is a 3/3 day time in which the sun appears to rise in exactly the same spot on the horizon. It is curious indeed that the long count of the Mayan, actually Mesoamerican cultures, would end on that day. It is also curious that the Pope Gregory of Gregorian calendar fame would have the long count actually ended 11/11 on that day. Also curious is that the numeral reference sums to 11 December 21, 2012 equal 11. These curiosities arise due to the encoding of knowledge into number patterns. As an instance, the number 11 at its space level of symbolism refers to the sunspot cycle, which is 11 and some fractional part years in length. Conclusion: and where we were wrong earlier, it is the sunspot cycle that concerns us humans and other critters here on Earth. The reason is that universe is composed of cycles within cycles within cycles at levels and complexity we may barely be able to perceive. These cycles include large cycles based on smaller cycles. One of these smaller cycles is our local sunspot cycle. While our work at HPH has shown indications of a sun disease since 1997, and this reference was to a disease of the sun rather than a disease caused in Earth life by the sun, within our datasets this language fell onto the set of what we call the Big Squeeze. This label was applied due to the many and repeated references to magnetics gone wrong in our data. It was our theory that the cause for the Big Squeeze was the alignment of the Earth and the Sun with the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which is coincident with 2012. This necessitated the idea of new forms of energy from extrasolar system sources in order to explain all the changes to the local planets in our Sun. Such an understanding is wrong. There is an understanding that provides for the current changes in the planets and the Sun that does not require any external sources of energy. This understanding has to do with the totality of the sunspot cycles, and what causes them, and the larger cycles built upon them. The material below is based on books by Patrick Gerald, including The Orion Prophecy, and How to Survive 2012, and The World Cataclysm in 2012, which may be obtained from his website at www.howtosurvive2012.com. Gerald bases some of his work in the decoding on Maurice Cotterell's work in the Mayan prophecies. I am of the opinion that Cotterell's work does support Gerald's sunspot cycle contention, and that Cotterell did not take the symbolism far enough to reach the same conclusion as Gerald. Further, in my research into Vedic and pre-Vedic Hindi and Pali literature, as well as Taoist and pre-Chan Buddhism Chinese myths, I find that the same numeric coding exists in these widely dispersed cultures, and that these numeric codings are of the same nature as Gerald has decoded in the Mayan and Egyptian symbols. Unfortunately, there is also a very substantial science-based analysis supporting the idea that the planet Earth has repeated in periodic episodes of crustal displacement at some significant and civilization-shattering levels. After the path of the poles, and other researchers have found historical and geologic evidence for hundreds if not thousands of such pole and crustal shifts. Also, the ancient Chinese texts refer to 4/4 previous world-changing cataclysms. The Mayans also have the fourth age or world ending in their long count calendar, and the Egyptian pharaoh texts refer to 8/8 such occurrences, while an armor plate details 11/11 previous crustal shifts. The Vedic and pre-Vedic texts refer to 4 worlds or kingdoms destroyed each time by world-altering cataclysm, so there is ample evidence that pulls all the parts together under the idea of periodic crustal and pole shifts here on Earth. The graphics below will provide a proof of concept illustrations to a brief discussion showing a mechanism that, if not causal, at least participates in the shifts. Please note all fractional parts of numbers referenced have been dropped for clarity. These numbers can be obtained in Gerald's books. To start, it is necessary to understand that our Sun has 99% of all the mass in the solar system, but only 1% of the angular momentum, whereas the reverse is true. That is, all the planets have only 1% of the mass, but have 99% of the angular momentum. This idea is important as it explains why the Sun spins at 2 different speeds. Both the Mayan and the Egyptian civilizations knew that the pole of the Sun takes 37 days to rotate and the equator of the Sun takes only 26 days. Note we are leaving off the fractional parts. It is also worth noting that this information can only, as far as we can tell, be determined if you are a spacefaring civilization. So how did these ancient cultures know this? Anyway, due to the pull of the planets on the equator of the Sun, the equator spins faster than the solar pole, and as a result, every 87 days the equator laps the pole of the Sun. It is this basic motion that is responsible for the sunspot cycle as well as other, much more dramatic cycles in Sun behavior. Note that no attempt at scale or complexity is used in the following illustrations. Our Sun is a giant magnetically based electric generator. As the angular momentum of the planets pulls on the Sun's equator, it also pulls upon and distorts the magnetic forces within the Sun. This tug from the planets takes one complete lap every 87 days. The effect of this is a winding of the magnetic forces within the Sun. From the Sun's north or south pole, this effect, if we could see magnetic lines of force, would resemble the swastika symbol. This is an important note as all the ancient cultures of this planet used the swastika as a symbol at the core of all of their end times myths. This symbol did not originate with the Nazi movement in Germany, and was deliberately chosen by them due to its fundamental importance to humanity and civilization. As each arm of the magnetic winding crawls up the surface of the Sun, it will pass the magic number of 19.45 degrees of latitude. This number is magic as that is where the sunspots happen, and coincidentally where all the storms happen on the gas giants, and such interesting places as Hawaii happen here on Earth. This number is magic as it is also the point at which the internal hyperdimensional Merkaba interlinked tetrahedrons will contact the edge of the sphere we perceive as the Sun. The sunspot cycle is so named as this point of contact between the Merkaba and the manifesting reality of the Sun's surface is where sunspots develop. These sunspots are to the heart of the Sun, what it pulses to the heart of a human. To continue, as the winding pressure increases on the Sun over time by each 87-day lap, a larger structure of magnetic pressure is created both internally and externally to the Sun. This larger pressure builds within the huge forces tugging on the magnetic structure of the Sun over a period in excess of 11,500 years. The result of the pressures is a level of chaotic tension in the magnetic structure of the Sun. As the pressures bend the magnetic arms of the Sun, and they crawl up the Sun like windings of string around a ball, they will cross the 19.45 latitude. If they happen to do so when the internal rotation of the Merkaba is coincident, the sunspot will form and it will continue as long as the winding arm is synchronized with the rotation, usually about 25 days or so. As the forces pressuring the magnetic structure of the Sun increase with time, the pressures can naturally be expected to build until a breaking point is reached. All of the ancient warnings via myth and symbols point to the breaking point of the sunspot cycle as the key indicator of a pending pole and crustal shift here on Earth as well as other planets. The reason that the pressures on the magnetic structure of the Sun results in a pole and crustal shift here on Earth is due to our own planet's magnetic nature. Our planet is basically a dirt and water-covered magnetic generator similar to the core of the Sun. The magnetic health of our planet is directly tied to the Sun. As a noteworthy fact, the magnetosphere protecting our Earth has weakened constantly these last 10,000 years. No longer healthy, as in the above graphic, our magnetosphere is both weak and full of holes that are growing over these last few years. As the Sun's magnetic structure nears its breaking point relative to the pressures exerted by the angular momentum, it will expand in a spherical fashion outward as the 11 there is that number again, centuries of stress are blown off. The following graphics illustrate this process. Any resemblance between these illustrations and recent crop circles is entirely a meaningful coincident manifestation of reality, as may be expected. Having the magnetic sphere of the Sun expand and bulge out past the orbits of the inner planets likely will have an impact on Earth since we are one of the inner planets. 13 of 23. The thinking is that a magnetic bow wave will be followed by a coronal mass ejection comet, which is what the powers that we seem most afraid will encounter. However, the real danger to the planet comes from the magnetic bow wave itself, especially when we have a diminished and weakened magnetosphere. The impact of the magnetic discharge from the Sun will overwhelm what is left of Earth's protective magnetosphere and initiate both a pole and a crustal shift. Details of this process may be found in Gerald's books. The effects will be profound. As the inner core of the Earth rotates due to the impacting magnetic solar discharge, the actual physical alignment of the Earth will change from our current positions. Pre-shift. Potential post-shift. Other view. Coincidentally curious, the pyramids of the Giza Plateau are in the exact center of the planetary landmasses. This begs the question of why, as a marker perhaps as to the center of rotation of the planet under such circumstances as a free-floating crust, bearing in mind that there is no down in space, when the crust of the Earth rotates, its position and point of rotation will be determined by gravity as determined by what object in space is closest to the center of mass of the Earth, conveniently marked by the Giza pyramids. The two candidates that we have to specifically affect our rotation are the Moon and the Sun, though smaller. The Moon is closest, and if it may be a primary determinant for how these periodic crustal spins resolve themselves. Summation that can be seen from the illustrations above that such a mechanism would account for the multitudinous effects that are currently manifesting in our solar system, as well as the previous fossil and geologic records of such cataclysms, and it does so without requiring any extra solar system spatial or positioning inputs or energies. Further, it can be noted from reading Gerald's books that the math involved is both precise and predictable, for us as well as our ancestors. Gerald's book and website, www.howtosurvive2012.com, both contain strategies as well as ancient historical reference from humans who have survived. This, of course, is the personal key to all of this. Note humans have survived this in the past. Your very existence is living proof of that. No reason that humans can survive it again. Of course, time is very short as of November 3, 2009, less than 1,144 days remain if the Mayan long count is accurate, and energies and resources must be used very intelligently in the time remaining. What if Gerald and us nutters here at HPH are wrong? Well, then the solar system is still seriously disturbed by something, as are all the planets, and Earth is clearly in crisis, and getting worse. So the question then is, if we are wrong, how are we injured by preparing for a crustal shift in the immediate future? Let's see. Store food. Okay. That works either way. Have an unsinkable boat. Okay, that can be a pocket cruiser if not needed as our planetary lifeboat, and can be used if civil chaos descends to stand offshore, or can be used as an emergency RV if earthquake, etc. And all the while noting that the level of stress on the planet is rising towards some form of crescendo. And the powers that be both know about it, and are constantly telling you about it. If you are American, pull out the $1/$1 bill. This note from the private elitist organization known as the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not part of your federal government, has no reserves, and is not a bank, but is hugely tied to all kinds of secret societies, tells you every time you handle its $1/$1 note, if they know what is coming. Look to the back of the bill, look under the pyramid with the strange symbol of the floating eyeball. There you will see the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, which actually translates as New Order of the Ages. Note that it is wrong to think this means New World Order. Rather, the word ages means astrological or zodiac ages, and the fall and crustal shift is intimately involved with the new ordering of the zodiac ages. Such symbols about what the powers that be actually do know are everywhere, and are a fascinating study in and of themselves, but we simply don't have the luxury of time for that anymore. The facts of the matter are that such pole and crustal shifts have happened repeatedly in the near and far past, so denial of the potential under these circumstances is more local than scientific, and it only takes observation of the global chemtrail agenda, or the visual changes in the sun over these last 10 years to understand that big transitions are occurring. Plus, even the mostly gutless NASA folks are actually saying that Solar Cycle 24 will be exceptionally active, and Solar Cycle 24 coincidentally peaks in 2012. If the sunspot cycle mechanism is accurate, will there be precursors? You betcha. No doubt about it. And it can be postulated that the cracking of the Indo-Australian tectonic plate in the tsunami-causing earthquake of 2004 is within the expected precursors. Other indicators will continue to be increasing earthquakes and other tectonic plate cracks. Further signs will come from solar behavior as well as the impacts of solar radiations here on Earth. The radiation impacts will include damages to plants and animals. Further, as the pressures within the sun continue to build in the last days, perhaps weeks, maybe even months before the energetic release, there are likely to be predictable effects throughout the solar system. Most of these will be of electrical or magnetic nature and may include truly bizarre problems such as rapid changes in magnetic and electric properties of metal things here on Earth. Further, the sun's magnetic output would predictably become increasingly subject to fits of chaotic expulsions, as well as very erratic sunspot activity as the magnetic fields become distorted to extremes. The electrical problems here on Terra would include our communications satellites going wonky, perhaps even to the point of failure. This should happen some months prior to the energetic release by the sun. Other predictable electric effects will include strange ground properties and static discharges of noted specific spots on the planet internal hyperdimensional locations. It would seem likely that the planet would also continue to heat up internally in spite of atmospheric cooling. Thus the oceans will continue to warm, and the ice melt at the poles. Even as large snow masses begin to build in former temperate zones, it seems likely that a large ice release from Antarctica is probable in the last year or so prior to the shift. This will be related to an increase in energies from space that should have in general 2009 be warmer in the northern hemisphere winter, with both 2010 and 2011 exhibiting exceptionally odd warming patterns, especially at the poles. This will lead to some spectacular ice releases in both north and south poles. Some predictable effects from this process would include a gradual for centuries drop in the polar magnetic fields of the sun and also the Earth and other planets, culminating in a virtual absence of polar output from the sun for a very brief period of time just prior to the actual expansion phase of the process. Further, it is predictable that the last few years prior to the expansion phase, there will be a long period of virtually no regular sunspots. During this part of the sunspot cycle, the only sunspots that will be created will be of a very capricious and chaotic nature. These sunspots should be mostly singular, and of a short lifespan, sometimes merely hours, or even minutes as we get closer to the expansion phase. This will be due to the writhing and internal twisting of the magnetic field lines as they whip around and intermittently align with the Merkaba points at 19.47 degrees of latitude. During the last period prior to the expansion, that is the last days, which may extend for a couple of months, the Sun will be chaotic, and will be viewed as writhing and convulsing from our perspective here on Earth. Coincident with the changes within the Sun and on the Sun's visible surface, there will be predictable effects here on Earth. Our Terran environment will be exposed to exceptionally high levels of energies from space. These energies will not be kind to humans and other living things. These energies will include higher levels of actinic burning rays of both visible and invisible light, as well as increases in X-rays and cosmic rays. And unknown types. There will be predictable effects of the end of this nearly 12,000-year cycle of sunspots on conditions here on Earth. These will include a continuing building of large and damaging earthquakes in an irregular but frequent pattern globally, including these damaging earthquakes occurring in places not usually associated with quakes. This will peak with a steady, daily shift to large 6+ earthquakes in many geologically sensitive areas on the planet. Other predictable impacts include increasing downtime for our satellites as the energies from space are pouring in through the decreasing Terran magnetosphere. These same energies from space will cause odd electrical effects across the planet. These will include arcing ground wherein the Earth itself will produce electric arcs, strange lightning, odd atmospheric phenomena including stationary vortex follow clouds that will try to drill into the Earth. Further effects will produce disruption to communications in the radio and cell phone frequencies, and ultimately even in shielded ground landlines. Many of these once-in-a-half precession 12,000 years more or less effects will also impact the human body directly, as well as with electromagnetically sensitive animals. Humans will find it difficult to even stand upright, maintain normal balance at times due to the perception of gravity gone awry. These will be felt at first by a small part of the populace, but over time this cohort will increase as the waves of magnetic flux become strong enough to cross the perception threshold of larger segments of the general human populace. These and other predictable effects will make the whole of the transition through this phase of solar activity a very strange time for humans and other life on Earth. The smart individual will examine everything that happens to them, including all internal perceptions, with the goal of integrating the experience into their personal survival strategy. The unaware will be simply reacting to the strange qualities of the time's Kairos and will be a danger to themselves and others. As may be understood, the final years leading up to a solar expansion and subsequent pole and crustal shift here on Earth are themselves likely to be filled with challenges to life and sanity. To navigate these years, it will be necessary to have an accepting through critical analysis attitude about the rapidity and nature of the changes to the local solar system environment. It will also be advisable to not lose sight of the bigger picture, and therefore to be able to place each of the changes into your collection of temporal markers indicating the progress of the process as a whole. It may assist both immediately and in the future to write daily log entries now, noting such strangeness as develops. This should preferably be on archival level of paper if you wish it to last, as it is likely that the entering the magnetic pulse from the Sun, as well as the flip internally of the Earth's magnetic core, will destroy any and all digital records. A daily habit of logging during these years will also provide historical records for future generations as to the minutiae of this seemingly very regular time process. Daily log entries also will be of use if universe joins you to a seafaring civilization. If interested in the unsinkable boat approach, you can start with fully enclosed lifeboat searches to get an idea of what is required at the small group level. Such boats can be built from simple materials such as plywood and marine resin and polyester or fiberglass cloth. Bear in mind that it is not necessary to construct the ultimate boat. It need only serve a single task, and needs to only meet the demands of a single voyage, though it looks to be a rough bit of sailing, if ancient history is any guide. Also note that almost any small boat can be made unsinkable, but other considerations such as knock-down response apply under these circumstances. There are also physical properties of the planet, its oceans, and atmosphere, that just may mean that certain forecasted conditions cannot occur during a crustal shift, As an example, there are physical properties of the atmosphere which tend to slow winds down as they reach the surface. Further, this effect is enhanced when the winds are over water, thus the Earth does not have winds exceed 180 knots at sea level, in spite of the same conditions creating winds over 250 knots at 5,000 feet of altitude. There are also several levels of ancient writings from a number of cultures which point out that the shift happens as a series of big jerks. This is a very encouraging sign as, from our perspective, a series of even very violent jerks would prevent continuous motion mass, moment to build in the engineering sense of the word moment, and thus such things as 300-mile-per-hour winds would not be likely to develop. Such jerks could even be capable of dampening down very large oceanic movements. Not that it would not still be horribly violent beyond our ability to imagine, but such jerky movements would make the whole process that much more survivable. Final point, we are here. Each of us is demonstrable proof that humans have come through this in the past. No reason at all that we can do it again. Oh, and this time, let's leave all the crap such as feudal monarchies and religious hierarchies behind with the rest of the old tired debris from a failed civilization. But bring your sourdough bread starters and pie supplies, please. Musings, this process is likely required to recharge the electrically based magnetosphere of Earth. This process may be part of every solar system in our electric universe. This process is likely linked to the formation of ice ages as well as the cold cycle of oceanic refresh. Cold is good for oceans, warm is bad. Thus, this is likely a good thing in total. These sunspot cycles are linked to human reproduction as well as specific forms of human mental illness, both permanent and transitory. It may be that these cycles are also linked causal to the periodic extinction events found in fossil records independent of the extinction by crustal shift/planetary flooding that accompanies them. If anyone says that this time is different, as in the good E.T. will save our asses, then one should inquire why. This time, as opposed to the previous 3 times in the last 40,000 years, is different, and then disregard whatever answer is proffered as it will be a bullshit distraction from the preparations necessary to survive a natural disaster of this magnitude. Also, if informed that this time is different because a particular human who claims to have sent E.T. home has been given magic knowledge that he claims to have used to save the world by diverting the whole solar system to an alternative timeline, variant such and so, ignore this bullshit as well as it is delusion and madness expressed at all levels. There is also the claim that this time is different because consciousness is raised to such a level as to cause a significant section of the planetary populace to transit to another reality that is of a different density than the regular old 3D reality currently biting our butts. This is just another form of the external savior myth, only in this variant. We are each our own external savior and that some action of ours will be deemed sufficient by some form of consciousness presumed to be in charge and we will therefore ascend to a higher density during the chaotic times ahead. Further than them is the ascension based on personal work, is self-judged at least at this level, and also follows with corollaries that include a percentage of the populace being left behind because they did not get it at a sufficiently high enough level to qualify. Nice move, but worth betting your life on. And as I am frequently willing to point out, ascension to another level of vibratory density would require that the 3D body be left here, and we call that process death. No thanks. I would rather be betting on my skills as a boat builder and small craft sailor, and then New World explorer. Once the shift has hit, and things have settled down, it is a good bet that ice will be off Antarctica, and all kinds of interesting things may be discovered there. Siberia ought to be the new wine country and grain basket of the planet. Source material as well as survival strategies can be found at Patrick Gerald's books, including The Orion Prophecy, and How to Survive 2012, and The World Cataclysm in 2012, which may be obtained from his website at www.howtosurvive2012.com. Graphics by Rebecca Price. Further information can be obtained in books by Charles Hapgood. Path of the Poles, Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. Also see books by Graham Hancock, especially Underworld, about ancient civilizations currently underwater. Time is short, wake the fuck up.